Hello there, and welcome to Gooner U. My name is Dove, and my friend Keith is here to bring me up to speed on everything I don't know about soccer and Arsenal. This week featured a Premier League match at the City Ground against Nottingham Forest. Hello, Keith.
Do we have to?
I know. We'll reduce to as short a time as possible how long we spend against this game that didn't really end up mattering in only insofar as I guess it cemented our place in number two. But
Yeah,
yeah.
number two. That's a good word for it. Yeah, I mean, really, there isn't a lot to say about it. I mean, there are some things we can say, and I think what it portends for the club, which will be sort of we can do this more, I guess, next week when the season ends, but sort of talk about what the summer is going to be like and some of the things that might happen. We've touched on them a lot, especially in the last week or two, but I think there were some interesting things there that we can draw lessons from, but otherwise, yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of lessons to be drawn from what was a pretty dreary game.
Yeah, dreary is about right. Well, so let's start with some follow up from last week. So I had mentioned the Old Trafford Lego set and to move quick because Lego sets don't last forever. Apparently, the set has already been retired. As far as I know, it was retired before we recorded and I hadn't noticed. But that just means that you need to spend more money on it and get it on eBay. You can't usually find it from retailers brand new, like from the normal channels. So
It sounds like a lot of money to spend just to play Godzilla on.
oh God, don't even. By the time you spend as long as I know those large Lego sets take to construct, I'm almost done with my Moss Eisley Cantina right now. I call it mine. I bought it as a birthday gift for my son. I've been the one who's been putting it together. He will be the one who plays with it.
Well,
But
speaking of wretched hives of scum and villainy,
yeah, so the thought of spending the hours, like literal days, if you add all the hours together into work days, on building something, the thought of a Calvin and Hobbes style Godzilla rampage, no, thank you.
counterpoint,
By the
it's
way, let me
Manchester United, so
By the way, let me take this opportunity to thank everyone who watched us on YouTube last week. I did actually get that video posted, so we're going to try it again this week, and hopefully we'll only get better with time. So, so we'll see how that goes. By way of intro to our next topic, let me state, so, we did end up playing Nottingham Forest. I think I was so let down by the end of the game, I forgot to put the final score in the show notes. But so watching this match, Keith watched it live as he usually does, or basically always does. I did not this time. I had other things going on this weekend, but I was watching the replay later. By which point Keith had added this next item into the show notes, something about Folarin Balogun. And a part of me throughout this entire match was hoping, because the commentators had said at some point that there were a bunch of players on our bench who had not seen a minute of Premier League play yet this week. And I was hoping that there was some player named Folarin Balogun who I'd never heard of before, never seen play, who was going to come in and win the match for us. And I was sorely disappointed that that was not the case. So please fill me in on what his actual story is.
okay. I feel like his name has come up before, but I guess it hasn't. So
Not
Fuller
that
and
I
Balogun.
remember.
Okay, Fuller and Balogun is a young player. He's a striker. He is on Arsenal. Well, he's not on Arsenal currently. He's an Arsenal player. He came up through the academy. Currently on loan at Rennes in France, and is one of the leading scorers in Ligue 1, which is pretty impressive given he's like 20.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like a really nice piece for us. He was raised in London, come up through the Arsenal Academy, has played youth teams in England, but was born in New York City, meaning he was eligible to play for the United States. Also, his parents are Nigerian, so he is also eligible to play for Nigeria. Having played through the English youth system, he was probably going to end up in the England squad, or at least going to end up as a player that England will be looking at. But he has been courted by the United States, and because this past week, the U.S. is in a competition this summer, the CONCACAF Nations League. We had to announce our preliminary roster for that tournament, and basically we asked him if he was in, and he said he was in, and so he is switching his nationality, so to speak. to
His
join the U.S.
affiliation, yeah.
Yeah, to join the U.S. national team, which it looks like he's going to play this about a little less than a month from now. We play Mexico in Las Vegas on June 15th, and I hope to be there. And he is, and we talked a little bit about this, I think, during the World Cup. Probably the biggest weakness in the U.S. squad is the lack of a goal scorer. We do not have a practice striker, an accomplished striker at the top level. We're about to get one of the leading scorers in the French league is about to become our striker, which again,
Nice.
as we've talked about, I came into the sport watching the U.S. national team, so that is as much as I love Arsenal, the U.S. is first, and we got him.
Yeah,
this is gonna be fun.
That's cool.
So yes, that's So it is an Arsenal connection. He is an Arsenal player. Now, having said that, here's the other fun thing: we're probably going to sell him this summer. Or at least he's probably going to ask to be sold. And we'll talk about this, I think, a little bit during the game as well. With transfers, there's always not just the two teams making an agreement, as would be in an American sport where the two teams trade players. In Europe or in the larger soccer market, it is both teams and the player has to agree to the move. And there are players who will ask and force their way out. And the suspicion is that Balogun is going to do that because he probably won't get a lot of playing time with Arsenal, whereas somewhere else he goes, he would get that. He wouldn't get this. Somewhere else he'll be the frontline striker. With us, he would at best be a rotation. He probably ends up as a rotational piece. Worst cases, he turns into Eddie Nketiah, which we like Eddie Nketiah, but Balogun, I think, has reason to say he's already a more accomplished player than Nketiah is. So probably getting sold, but for this brief moment, there's an Arsenal man leading the U.S. front line, and it's just glorious.
Yeah, it's cool. I was shopping at Dick's Sporting Goods this weekend, looking to pick up some stuff for Reed, some American football stuff, some baseball stuff, and going by the soccer section, I saw Pulisic U.S. men's national team jersey. So yeah,
yep.
I also realized now it's.
Oh no! Yeah, so I was just gonna add with the Balogun thing. I sent you the link, so it's in there. The Athletic did a piece where they sort of detailed how he was recruited. So if you're interested in that sort of angle to the story, like how it is you recruit somebody to switch your national team, it tells the story of how the U.S. did that, and it's been a long process, a multi-year long process of keeping in touch with him, keeping track of him. This isn't the kind of thing that just sort of happened at the spur of the moment. There's been a lot of work that was put into it by U.S. Soccer. So if you're into that side of the game at all, sort of those behind the scenes kind of thing, it's a nice little window into how some of that takes place.
Yeah, cool. What was I gonna say?
Picking
USMNT
up stuff from Dick's.
Yeah, no, just with USMNT, I'm appreciative of how close that is to TMNT. It's like the Turtles men's national team. But yeah, so anyways, so also this week, I appreciate that you mentioned a week or two ago about when we had covered that Apple TV. And by the way, it is apparently the MLS is covered by Apple TV, not Apple TV Plus. And it's a whole thing. Like the naming around Apple's TV services and devices is fraught. There's a lot of overlap and it's very confusing to talk about. But so MLS is on Apple TV, not Apple TV Plus. If you subscribe to Apple TV Plus, you get a discounted rate on MLS. But so anyway, so there's a free trial of MLS, and you had mentioned that there were free games every week. And I had an opportunity this past week. I wasn't doing anything. I was sitting in front of a TV and I said, oh, there's some matches going on. And I watched the first, it turned out to be like 15 or 20 minutes of NYC FC's match this past week. So I have some additional thoughts and observations beyond just the first match that I had watched when they played Memphis for the season opener. This was against Orlando. So in no particular order other than the order in which I observed these things. First of all, Orlando Stadium is tiny, like compared to the stadiums I'm used to seeing that are absolutely packed for basically every match we've seen Arsenal play in. It is a small stadium. I'm not sure if that affects what my next observation was, or if it's completely independent, I would need to watch more matches to really determine. But the camera angle on the matches is different in a very noticeable way. Like all the Premier League, and I can't remember now because it was a while ago, but the Europa League competition I think was the same, because I probably would have noticed it if it weren't. But the angle that they show Arsenal is always very high up, looking at the whole field. You can always see like both touch lines on screen, or nearly both touch lines in view at once. And a pretty high angle down on the pitch. What I was noticing on this NYCFC versus Orlando match, I was noticing it was a much lower angle. It's more like you were sitting in the like lower deck instead of the upper deck almost. You were looking across players' heads more instead of looking down on top of their heads. And maybe because of that, or maybe separately, it was more zoomed in. Like the players were actually larger in frame. So it was interesting. I would have to watch more matches and watch complete matches to see which I would say I like more, but it's definitely different. And I don't know if that's because of how Apple is running it now, or if it was always like that, if it's just a difference in where they happen to make the mounts for the cameras in the US stadiums. I don't know what explains it, but that was interesting. Also, we had talked about the jerseys a little bit, and the connection between NYC and Manchester City. One thing that is definitely better with NYC's jerseys is they didn't put the crest in the center of the chest. I don't know if we ended up actually mentioning it when we played City the last time, but I can't stand the crest in the center of the chest. It looks stupid. I don't like the way it looks, but it's made further ridiculous by as soon as the players have been on the pitch for 10 or 15 minutes or longer, you see the crest surrounded by a circle of sweat because they get sweaty, and that apparently just having that there in between their pecs, it's a magnet for the sweat. And that's all you see is this like Manchester City crest surrounded by sweat. NYC is just a normal crest in the corner, like most soccer teams have. That said, I don't like the designs all over the jersey. It's blue, like in the same sky blue color as Manchester City, but it's got some kind of design all over it, which I wasn't a fan of. And lastly, it was just kind of funny. Orlando's sponsor is Orlando Health. And it's just kind of funny because the name of the team is part of the name of the sponsor. Like they're just Orlando. I don't think that they have like a nickname you would use, like Wolves or something like that. It looks like the team name is Orlando Health. Like it's just kind of funny when they're playing in Orlando Stadium and it's like says Orlando Health. It's like, oh, they're the Orlando Health. Like it was just kind of funny. But
there's a lot to unpack there, because I watched the same game, although obviously was watching for different reasons, and I watched the whole thing. Well, I shouldn't say unfortunately.
Right.
City did level at the end, which was nice because I hate
Oh, he did. They drew.
Yeah, they got a goal very late, which was the first road goal we've scored in like 5 games. So we're really good at home.
It looked
really
like it was pretty dire. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yes, Orlando's stadium, Exploria is the name of it. The sponsor on it is it's small-ish. It seats 25,000, which is kind of small even for an MLS one. There are some big ones in MLS. A lot of them are NFL stadiums, but even at reduced capacity, still seat over 30,000, 40,000 people. It's about 25, which would make it roughly the same size. And I'm reading the numbers off of Wikipedia here, but roughly the same size as Selhurst Park, where Crystal Palace plays. And it is actually not. I mean, it's at 25,000, and City Ground, where Arsenal was this past week, is 30,000. About 30,000. Yeah, there's 30,000. So it's not. Like in a lot of American stadiums would probably be on the small end of a Premier League stadium. But if you look at Premier League stadiums, Old Trafford's at 74,000. And then Tottenham Hotspur's at 62, Emirates is at 60, the London Stadium's at 60. Those stadiums would be on the lower end of the scale, except Old Trafford, but the ones at 60,000 would be on the lower end of the scale of stadiums in the NFL, the American Football League. So it's kind of a soccer isn't the NFL in the United States, but American football obviously is not the Premier League in England. So some of that's just responding to audiences. As far as the angle goes,
Sure.
I suspect that's where the camera mounts were set up within the stadium when it was built. Nothing looked out of the ordinary. It's interesting. The more you watch at different stadiums, even within the same sport, you do start to notice they have different angles, and there's just something about watching a game in a certain stadium that you just expect a certain perspective on the field. And some in particular with a much more exaggerated one where you're really high and almost like you're looking down on them,
Mm-hmm.
and some where you're very low and it does feel a little bit like you're much closer to the level of the field. Orlando's generally
I
considered a very nice stadium. The U.S. national team has played there several times. They seem to do well there. They seem to like it. So um, it's
Yeah,
a bit
I did
smaller.
notice, in addition to the primary angle being lower, it seemed like the coverage just moved angles a lot more, which you almost have to because of having that lower angle. You can't see everything that's going on as clearly. So they would do alternate angles way more often than you see during a typical Arsenal match that I'm used to watching, which was
And some
good
of
too.
that,
I did
yeah.
like that, definitely.
And some of that's some of that's also production decision. Some whoever as they're watching the game, they're deciding. And
Right.
Apple's got their style, NBC's got their style as far as covering the Premier League and making those camera choices. So there's a little bit of that going on. I laughed a lot at the crest comment. Crest position is one of those things that if you're someone who cares about it, it drives you insane when it's not where you want it to be. That position though, that is a manufacturer's decision. So
Huh.
City is one of those. Is outfitted by Puma, Manchester City, that is, and they'll have a series of kits with the crest right there in the center of the chest. Though the U.S. has done that as well under Nike. Arsenal's done it for a year. Has done it before under Nike. Um, but
Hmm.
the MLS is all outfitted as a league by Adidas, and Adidas does the like Arsenal has
Right.
it over here on the left. Um, I can't speak to the attraction of the sweats, not to get too personal on this podcast, but when I'm in the gym, I also tend to have a lot of sweat pooling up in certain parts, and I don't have a crest on my gym shirts, so I think that's just
Yeah.
because that's just where there's a lot of sweat on
Well,
them.
right, there is.
Yeah.
But absent a crest, you get a little sweat mark there, right?
Well,
But
yes, it does.
the way that it gathers around the crest is what's obnoxious and weird, right? Like it doesn't gather around the crest when it's directly on the pec. Like sweat does pool between your pecs. Like
Right.
absolutely, it does for most people, I would imagine. But yeah, it's a reason not to have it there.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those, again, one of those, once you notice it, and if you decide you care about it, it will drive you crazy. But some people, there are a lot of people who like, oh, that's right, it is there. So, um,
Yeah.
and actually, yeah, so Orlando's full name is Orlando City SC. They're Orlando City Soccer Club. They
Right.
sometimes go by the Lions because you'll notice their crest was a lion head. Um, as for New York City's kits, there were new ones for this year. MLS does this interesting thing where every year they switch out. You get them for 2 years, but each year they're switching out a different one. So this year, City got a new
Hmm.
home kit, and what it is,
Oh,
you might not have seen it.
interesting.
It might have been a little hard to see. So it's actually kind of a neat design. I think it's meant to look like a mosaic of the club's logo, of the monogram, the
Hmm.
NYC logo, but designed like a mosaic, like subway tiles. New York City really likes to do
Okay.
subway. They're very much this whole thing about being in the city and part of New York City. They like a lot of subway style imagery,
Yeah.
and sort of a lot of the way they do things. So it's
Hmm.
once you can go look it up like on the on the the team store or something, and you'll see a clear view of what it is, and you can actually make out the bits
Right.
and pieces. It doesn't always translate as well on the on television, of course, but I
Right.
mean, I
The way
I
that
kind of like
most
it.
people are going to see it. Yeah.
Yeah, but I kind of like it. So I mean,
Yeah, I
we've
guess.
always
Yeah.
had
To me, seeing it on TV, it looked busy, I guess, is my main
it.
criticism of
It
it.
is a little busy, but then again, not quite as busy as their away kit, which is orange, and I'll I'll let you look it up. You don't have to do it now, but I'll let you look it up. Just know that a number of fans refer to it as the David Bowie kit. That's all I'll say.
Oh,
Um,
boy.
but
Okay.
anyway, yeah. So MLS Detour.
All right. Well, the time has come, the walrus said, to speak of Nottingham Forest. Um, yep. So, as we record, this match happened 2 days ago on May 21st. And we very extremely frustratingly lost 1-0. This should not have happened. It really should not have happened. I don't know how many details we want to go into, but oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was a poor performance. Credit to Forest, who has, as you probably caught in the broadcast, has now clinched their spot in the Premier League for next season. They were kind
Right.
of around the relegation line, but this win got them to safety, so it was a good environment for them. So that it does sort of lend something interesting to the end of the season. It's a real difference between the way an American sporting season will end and the way of this, English soccer season will end. In the American one, there's a sort of sense that you're gearing up for the postseason, right? Everything's targeted towards the playoffs.
Right.
And so if you're a team in Forest position, we don't have relegation, so you're not worried about it. So a team like that is typically they're just playing out the string. They're on the beach, as we've said.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas for Arsenal, it'd be like, all right, let's get the lineup set. Let's, maybe try some new things, just keep players healthy heading into the postseason. Who are we matched up with? Okay. The English season, nope, it's done. It's over. They're going to play
Mm-hmm.
the last game and that's it. And so for a team like Forest, which actually has something to lose, potentially being relegated, this game matters much more than it does to Arsenal, which obviously now it's officially over by losing. Manchester City has won the title. Yay for them. But in that sense, we even coming into this game, it required, among other things, City dropping points to Chelsea, which wasn't going to happen. So yeah, yeah. It just kind of an odd thing. We had essentially had very little or nothing to play for. They had everything to play for, which isn't what you might expect from given our positions on the table. But well, there it is.
Well, yeah, and I mean, on top of it, the goal that they managed to eke out, it was an improbable goal. Like three or four things happened wrong in quick succession that they did capitalize on. So definitely some credit is due to them. But it was just everything went wrong, and it was one goal. We scored five against them in our last match against them, right? I mean, they scored one goal. There is like zero justification for us not having scored even once with something like around 80% possession in our favor. How did we not score at least once? It was
Yeah, but
baffling.
but watch the game. How many times during that game did you actually say to yourself, "Man, we're almost there"? I mean, think about how many of those games we've had even over the last few weeks, where even the first half in Brighton, like just a couple hit the post here. That did you feel that way in this game?
Yeah, I mean, I noted them down when they happened. We had a bunch of close calls where I thought there was at least a chance it would go in. Um, it it didn't feel inevitable. There are games where it's like and we talked about it last week. We were talking about the last match, where it feels inevitable, especially towards the end of the half. Like they just all of a sudden, it's like the fire's in their bellies and they're gonna score. And very often, especially earlier in the season, they would. That hasn't materialized for the last like month or so, but that that I didn't feel. I didn't feel like it was inevitable they were going to score. I was hopeful just because the ball was on Forest's side the vast majority of the time. But what I did notice is we didn't get into the 18-yard box very much at all. They
No.
were really defending well, I guess, is what it comes down to. They were keeping us at bay to a large degree.
Yeah, and some of it was so it's a little bit of both. Certainly by scoring the goal, as we've talked about tactically, it allows them to sit back. They were playing with five in the back. They were parking the bus. They were definitely behind the ball. Trying to force us to break them down. The other side of that, though, is we were a mess. We did not look good, and so you saw some of that. So the big story pregame, Alexander Zinchenko apparently has a strain somewhere in his leg and is done for the year. all 2 games left, but
Mm.
he's done he was effectively out for the season. Gabriel Martinelli, we talked about, he got hurt in the Brighton game. He's done for the season. Don't know when he'll be back. Arsenal's been very coy about whatever it is has happened to him or what he may or may not be dealing with. Obviously, I hope it's not too serious, but we may
Right.
not know anything until August, when they, or even late July or mid July, when they come back for training camp. And then who knows what we'll know? Who knows? Or maybe he gets called up for Brazil this summer, if for whatever games Brazil has. I don't know what Brazil's doing this summer. But that being out, okay, with Martinelli, it's easy to put in Trossard, but with Zinchenko out, I mean, if Zinchenko's out, who's our left back?
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm asking who should be the left back,
You're
right? Who's
asking
our
me?
backup left back?
Oh, I think it would typically be Tierney. I
And it
think,
is,
and he
except,
did come in later.
yeah, but he didn't start, did he?
No.
No. So
I can't remember who it was in this match.
Well, so here's the fun thing. It almost looked like and depending on where you look, lineups and formations are always sort of there's kind of an odd thing about them. Like, are you this when you're in possession and this when you're out? Is it just where people start? Like, how does that work? Everyone has different roles. Like, we talk about Zinchenko, he plays left back, but then he drifts into the middle and spends most of the game like in the center of the field, right? If you look at this, what I think Arsenal was doing was effectively a back 3. So using Kivior, Gabriel, and White as our 3, they're all center backs. Ben White was a center back all of last year. He stepped in as right back this year and done well. But using them as center backs and then dropping Xhaka on the left and Partey on the right, essentially. So at times we could be 5 in the back. But typically going forward, you really only had the 3 in the back, and then one of them was dropping in at times to push a 4, or both of them were pushing forward. And what it looked like we ended up doing was overloading the right-hand side. And part of the problem there is it looked at times like Saka, Odegaard, and Partey were all kind of running into the same spaces. Like, this was a very different formation than what we've done, and a lot of it looked like guys didn't know where they were supposed to be. And
Right?
so
Yeah.
what you wind up with is a lot of possession, but it's a lot of empty possession. So as you
Right.
point out, yeah, we had a bunch of the ball, but look where we passed it, just all around the outside of the 18-yard box. It was very difficult for us to get any sort of penetration. Certainly going down, crowding down the right side. Saka, Odegaard, and Partey are trying to overlap with each other, but they don't have the same understanding. That certainly Ben White does with Saka. Saka's obviously a little bit tired. Odegaard, had a bad giveaway that ended up leading to their goal. I mean, you're right. It was one play. A lot of things had to go wrong, but we made a mistake and we got punished for it. They tried a few times on the other side. Trossard was kind of invisible, and also he was drifting inside a lot too. And we were arguing about that during the game. Is Trossard supposed to be further outside, and that's what's preventing us from attacking down the left? Or is he just, because we're not attacking down the left, he's drifting more into the center, and thus we're trying to he's trying to bring himself into the action more so.
Right.
Chicken and egg, I guess. I'm not really sure. Yeah, and you saw a couple times, look, that they tried to thread some balls into like Jesus running in up the middle, but that never really got to anything. And Forrest did a good job to sniff those out and push those away. So, yeah, it looked like we were kind of interestingly running out of options. This is a game, frankly, Zinchenko would have actually made a big difference. He would have been a really helpful piece in terms of his ability to pop up in different places, cause confusion, stretch the defense, or make those kind of extra passes that, maybe Odegaard would have been better had he been a little bit more central, to sort of see things as opposed to coming off to the right with Saka. So, yeah, it was a mess. It reminds a lot of people of the first year plus of Arteta's time in charge. Was they have these passing maps. Basically, there's arrows on the field, on a diagram of the field saying where are all the passes going to. And they called it the Horseshoe of Death because we were just building this arc around the 18-yard box, not getting anything into the box. And guess what? We didn't score a lot of goals because you score goals in the box.
Right.
So it was an unpleasant reminder of some very recent, less than pleasant times. And again, Tierney started on the bench. Emil Smith Rowe didn't play. I mean,
Right.
there's a lot of things that you could be said about that, and a lot of things that suggest about where they stand in the club's estimation, and where they see themselves with the club. We talked about players wanting to go, or the role players playing that. I mean, who knows? Maybe Tierney's already gone to them and said, if I'm not going to be a starter here, I want to go somewhere where I'm going to be a starter, which he's certainly within his rights to ask for, and he's a good enough player.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and the commentators were strongly implying, if not outright stating, that we basically are getting rid of Xhaka, it sounded like, for next season. So
Well, we're not so much getting rid of him because I saw that story. I guess it came out. I guess it must have come out on Tuesday because we recorded on Monday. There's apparently he's negotiating an offer from Bayer Leverkusen in Germany, um, which good
so
for
would that be a
him.
step up for him?
No. Bayer Leverkusen's kind of mid-table in the Bundesliga. What it would be probably is well, there's two probable things. One, it would allow he and his family to move to Germany, which he's Swiss, so Germany. I think his wife might be German, so being in Germany is
Mm-hmm.
a little more. I mean, he's been in London for a number of years now, obviously with Arsenal, but to be in Germany, especially towards the tail end of his career. The other part of it, and this was speculative, but who knows? At this point, Arsenal's been looking to sell Xhaka, or Xhaka's been available for sale for a couple seasons, and then when you can't sell him or get a price they like, they've sort of extend his contract just by a year, and you're kind of living on this year by year contract. I mean, Leverkusen might have come down and said, "Here's a 4-year contract." At which point,
Mm-hmm.
you want that extra security to know that, okay, I really can close out my career here. Um,
Yeah.
and as we talked about it, one of the fun parts of the summer is thinking about all the players we're going to bring in: Declan Rice, Caicedo, Mason Mount. I saw a suggestion on ESPN today that the Arsenal should put in a bid for Harry Kane and Jude Bellingham. I can't decide which one's funnier. Um, you know who Harry Kane is, yes?
Yes.
Yes,
The
from
other one
Tottenham,
I'm not familiar with.
which would
Yeah.
be hilarious if it actually happened, which is why it won't happen.
Right.
The other one, Jude Bellingham, is an English player. He plays in Dortmund, a young English player. He played for them in the World Cup. He's like 19 or 20. He's really good. Like,
Okay.
Manchester City and Real Madrid are competing for which of them gets to pay Dortmund 100 million euros to sign him. He's very good. He was probably
Hmm.
England's best player in the World Cup this
Hmm.
back in December. So,
Oh,
um,
okay. That's weird because that's really where I learned who Harry Kane was. I didn't remember him much. We'd played Tottenham before the World Cup, and he didn't make much of an impression on me. But after watching him in the World Cup, I made note of him, and now I know who he is. The other player I don't remember from the World Cup. Did he play much?
oh yes, he played a lot for England. He was probably
Oh,
their
okay.
best player. I mean, Kane, of course, is Tottenham's player. The nice thing is that this year Tottenham finally didn't score goals against us, which was a pleasant change of
Mm-hmm.
pace. Kane, I think, is the Tottenham player with the most goals all time against Arsenal. It's very annoying. Would be hilarious to sign him. Anyway, sidetrack. Yes, the real benefit of this point, at this point, as you start talking about transfers, the fun part is all the fun players you're going to sign, but you are going to get rid of some. Some guys are going to go. We talked about Balogun, who is not going to mean as much for you because you've obviously never seen him play, and apparently didn't even know he was at Arsenal, which is totally fine. No judgment. Um, but granted, Xhaka, we talked about. I mean, if Xhaka goes, I don't know that you swap out Thomas Partey as well. But I mean, Moises Caicedo, had they signed him, is a Thomas Partey replacement. Declan Rice is something of a Partey or Xhaka replacement. I mean, if those are guys you bring in, you sort of push guys out. Um, some of them are young guys on loan who have been on loan. Charlie Patino's another one. They're not going to break into the first team, so it might be better for them to get sold permanently elsewhere where they can have a playing career. Um, Kieran Tierney, Emil Smith Rowe. I mean, these are guys you look at. Tierney hasn't really played much recently. Again, a game where our left
Mm-hmm.
back was out. He should be starting, right? Nope. And
Yeah.
then Emil Smith Rowe. I mean, there's been some conversation about this. Again, this is all fan stuff. The club is very tight-lipped about this sort of thing, but there's been all this sort of fan conversation. I mean, where is Smith Rowe? I mean, on the one hand, it's hard to rotate him in with the way the team had been playing before. He's coming back from injury. But Arteta's also dropped comments all like in the last half of the season that he's not impressed with something. Something isn't. He's not impressed with something. He's said something along the lines of like he knows what he has to do. Kind of that.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't sound so good.
No.
So I mean, who knows? Again, you have to find a club that wants him. I mean, this is a much better position than we've been in the last several years of trying to sell players that nobody wants because we weren't very good. Now we've got a bunch of players people would pay money for, which is nice because again, there has to be a certain balance between money going in and money going out. So we're gonna have to sell some guys.
Mm-hmm.
And so Xhaka, it looks like, is going to end up being a nice start. And he'll leave on a high note, all things considered. There's been some pretty crazy stuff in all the years that Xhaka's been here. I know All or Nothing kind of hinted at a lot of this.
Right.
Almost transferring out. He said some very, very vulgar things while being booed as he was subbed off in a game. I think that was back in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Like Arteta basically had to talk him into, no, I want you to stay. I can help you. I'm gonna make this work.
Right.
So he's had a bit of a roller coaster in his career. So, but being on the club that gets Arsenal back into the Champions League is a nice high to go out on, I think.
Well, I mean, just for him personally too, it seems compared to what I saw in the documentary, he's turned a new leaf. Like we've talked multiple times about him not getting. I don't think he's gotten a red card yet this season, and with only one match left, that seems unlikely to happen now. His behavior has improved. He's doing the opposite of what he maybe typically would have done in the past. Like it seems like he has grown as a person too.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, and he has. We haven't gotten a red card, I don't think, all season. I don't believe we have. Which is.
I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I don't recall us getting a red card all season. We're gonna get one against Wolves. Now I've jinxed it, but yeah, I don't think we have. Which we got a lot. Yeah. The first couple of years under Arteta, there was a sort of question: oh, what's Arteta doing wrong? How do you fix all these red cards? And some of them were bad luck. Some of them were questionable refereeing decisions. But ultimately, it's a lot of it. It's about the players having the discipline to not put themselves in position where the referee can go, nope, red, get out.
Right.
And Xhaka's done that. He's avoided some of those situations that kind of got him into trouble in the past. Some of it's also his positioning on the field. He's in positions where he's less likely to commit fouls because of what he's being asked to do. Some of the fouls he committed that led to cards in years past have been, as he sort of has described it, him trying to cover for other players' mistakes and being in these weird and awkward and desperate positions and making challenges that he shouldn't be.
Right.
So that's a generous interpretation, I think, but still, I get where it's coming from. But yeah, it would be nice. It'd be nice for him to close out on a high note. It'd be kind of curious to see how Arsenal plays this last game in terms of the lineup, in terms of things. One thing you might see, I don't know how much they do this is in England. They'll do it from time to time. Is you wonder if you'll see some of the subs used individually for certain players. So, for example, maybe there'll come a time late in the second half, when Arteta will sub out maybe, for example, Xhaka, and just let Xhaka like have a moment where, as he's coming off, we've seen the crowd sort of salutes players that are coming off.
Right.
So, I mean, knowing that that's probably his last game, create that moment where he gets to be the center of attention, and everyone knows everyone is applauding for him. Or you might see it with a Saka or an Odegaard, sort of in recognition of the kind of seasons they have broadly had, as opposed to in the last couple of weeks. Certainly, that's the kind of thing you see a lot. You'll see a lot in American sports toward the end of the season. Especially basketball or football, where you have certain moments of substitutions like that. Kind of that last moment, and then when the game ends, they'll do like a lap around the stadium. They'll parade around and just have a sort of a nice moment in the afternoon sun where everybody or in the late afternoon, everybody just applauds, and
Oh,
just has a nice one.
speaking of the afternoon sun, you reminded me of something else I wanted to talk about from this match. So the way that this stadium was oriented, I don't remember seeing this at any other time this season. The goals were at apparently easterly and westerly exposure ends of the plot that they're on. So the sun was direct in Ramsdale's eyes toward the end, and there was one time where I forget what. I think there was a free kick. There was a free kick at goal scoring distance, and Ramsdale was there making a tent over his eyes out of his hand, making like the brim of a hat with his hand, right? And the commentators were saying what was on my mind, like, when did it fall out of fashion for goalies to wear caps? And it's something that I've thought about when I'm playing, because as much as I would have preferred to have it set otherwise, we've played in that situation too, where I'm like staring at the sun as a goalkeeper, and they basically came down on the side of, well, it just looks stupid. that's probably the reason. It's not fashionable, but
Yeah, I don't know. I have seen it before. I mean, they talk about it being a fashion. There were periods where keepers have worn hats, like
right,
more
but
like
way in
baseball
the
caps
past,
with
I
the.
think, right?
I feel like I've seen it, which I mean, I have been watching for a
Okay.
while now, so I guess it's close to 30 years I've been watching this sport. So maybe it's I guess it
Maybe,
could be
yeah. I
considered
mean,
the past, but I
I
do
was thinking
recall.
more like 50 or more years ago, like before our lifetimes, that it was something in the distant past that was done. You think more recently than that, though?
I want to say more recently. I mean, it's kind of odd. I'd have to look back and see. I mean, how much of this is tied to the timing of games? Obviously these days, it's all television related. But you think for the longest time, many of these stadiums didn't have lights, so they had to play at certain times because that was when the sun was out. Or
Mm-hmm.
alternately, you get lights and you can play. Are you playing around sunset late in the day, or are you perhaps playing in the? You have to play every game is played in the middle of the day and so the sun's way up here. So who cares? You don't need. It's not going
Right.
to be in anyone's eyes. And of course, you're right. The orientation of the goals as well. I mean, that's not going to be an issue in the Emirates because it's more of the enclosed stadium,
More.
um,
Yeah.
as opposed to as
Yeah. When
opposed to the
it's low
city
enough to
ground.
be in your eyes, it would be eclipsed. Yeah.
Yeah, and City Ground is one of those sort of older four-sided stadiums where it's not as big. It's going to be the sun can get a lot lower. And yeah, it was. I mean, if I'm doing the time right, I mean, it kicked off at 11:30 my time, 10:30 my time. Um,
Yeah.
11. It was 11:30 11:30 my
11:30 for you,
time.
12:30 East
Yeah.
Coast. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's 6 hours, so you're talking about kicking off at 5:30 in the
Yeah.
afternoon. I mean,
5:30. Yep.
so yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I can't bring myself to try and come up with a player of the match, and I'd rather not even think about it. I didn't even end up watching. Usually, before we record, I watch the 2-minute highlights that I put into the show notes. I couldn't bring myself to relive this match. I don't want to even think about player of the match. Do you feel the same?
I mean, only because I feel like you should in good times and bad. If you're gonna do it, you should do it. I would go
Okay.
with. I'd probably say I'd go with Jorginho. I thought Jorginho had a quiet sort of game. Well, I shouldn't say quiet. Actually, he's quite the gesticulator. He's definitely out there pointing and trying to get things going. I mean, he's not the most forward direct player. Someone like Party or Odegaard or even Xhaka is much better about progressive passing. But I thought Xhaka was kind of invisible. Party kind of disappeared on that right side. I think Saka's really tired. Odegaard kind of disappeared on that right side and had the really bad giveaway for the goal. Ramsdale didn't actually do anything because most of the game was spent on our end or their end. I can't really bring myself to pick any of the defenders. I thought, yeah, no, I can't really. So yeah, I'm gonna say Jorginho. I thought Jorginho had at least a decent game, which is more than I can say for some of the others.
Yeah, I mean, so okay, so you're making me think about it. That's okay. So I'm looking through my notes, and I'm seeing a couple times that I saw Jesus was close. I'm seeing another couple times that Jorginho was close to scoring. Going by that, it looks like Jesus maybe has the slight edge in terms of number of times that I noted near misses, but I haven't picked Jorginho before. I can go for Jorginho. Spread it
I'm
around
gonna,
a little bit.
but I'll say this, and we've sort of talked about this before, right? That some of it's the expectations game. Jorginho comes close to goal. It's a big deal. Good for him. Jesus
Yeah.
comes close to goal, and it's, dude, you're the striker. You have to score.
Right. Why
I
didn't
thought
you score?
Jesus
Yeah.
had. I thought Jesus for me was up and down. It's kind of an odd thing. He certainly Forrest was very grabby. We were very displeased with Anthony Taylor's officiating of the match because Forrest was very grabby. On the other hand, Jesus definitely tried to sell a few of them. To a little
Got
too
yellow
much at some
carded for
points.
it. Yeah.
Well, actually, no, actually, the one you're thinking of, I saw somewhere it wasn't actually that he wasn't booked for a dive; it was for descent. So what it
Oh, for
means,
arguing?
yeah. So what it means is he popped up and said something to the referee. He said the magic word to the referee, and it's like,
Oh, okay.
you can't say that. So yeah, at the time we all flipped out because I mean, it would have been a borderline penalty, but we were all like, we're begging for something. And there were a few other
Uh,
places, though. I mean, there were a lot of it felt like there were a lot of times they were very grabby arm pulls and things like that. And I mean, a few the other way that I was kind of like, that wasn't a foul. Okay. But yeah, just again, officiating, I'm just gonna leave
yeah.
that go. I mean, look, both these things can be true. The refereeing was bad, and so was Arsenal. Both of these things are true, and deserve to be. They can both be true, and I think that's worth stating. But yeah, this
Yeah.
game stunk. I don't know what we're gonna get against Wolves. It's the last game. It's at home. Neither of us has anything to play for. I'm hoping for a better showing. Wolves, gosh, Wolves can't buy a goal as this season. They're terrible offensively. Very good
Yeah.
defensively, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd be very curious to see what
Well,
the game looks like.
yeah, so I have some questions about this match, but before we do that, I wanted to talk to you because I think we were talking before we recorded. You have tried Liquid IV now, right?
Yes, I have. I've gotten I got a nice sampler pack. Actually, last week I had one that was strawberry, and I'm not a big strawberry guy. Just as a flavor, it's not what I particularly care for, but it was good. I had it, and made the water. I had on my gym run go down pretty smooth. So I'm pretty happy with it.
Ah, cool. Well, so for anyone who doesn't know, Liquid IV is the category winning hydration brand fueling your well being, and their hydration multiplier is the one product you're missing in your daily routine. In just one stick, this is what a stick looks like. You get, for those of you, of course, who are watching on YouTube, you get 5 essential vitamins and 2 times faster hydration than water alone. Use it first thing in the morning, before a workout, when you feel run down, after a long night out, and on long flights. Keith was talking about his recent experience with it. I've tried the strawberry lemonade, which I like. I've tried the yuzu pineapple. This that I have in my hand right now is tangerine. I have not yet tried it. That'll be the next one that I grab. And it's pretty good. So in just one of these sticks, so if you can tell on the video, so it's called a stick, but it's powder. I don't know if you hear of a sound of that kind of going up and down inside here, but it's a powder inside a stick-shaped packet. You pour it into a disposable bottle of water works well. That way you don't need to wash it out after. One stick of Liquid IV and 16 ounces of water hydrates you 2 times faster and more efficiently than water alone. There are 12 delicious and refreshing flavors to keep your hydration routine exciting. There are 5 essential vitamins, 3 times the electrolytes, and premium ingredients compared to other traditional sports drinks. It is non-GMO and free from gluten, dairy, and soy. And Liquid IV believes that equitable access to clean and abundant water is the foundation of a healthier world. So they partner with leading organizations for innovative solutions to help communities protect both their water and their futures. To date, Liquid IV has donated over 39 million servings in 50 plus countries around the world. So if you're thinking, hey, that sounds great, I could use better hydration in my routine, you can get 20% off when you go to liquidiv.com and use code Gooner, that is Gooner, there is no U in Gooner, at checkout. That's 20% off anything you order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code Gooner at liquidiv.com. There will be a link in the show notes. That is code Gooner, Gooner. So, as we do on this show, I have questions. One brief funny thing I just wanted to note from the match before we get to that. So NBC Sports was hyping something like all of our different non-soccer upcoming sporting events. There's horse racing and other things. I was laughing when the commentator mentioned the Kentucky Derby. Like my whole life, I've heard Kentucky Derby, and it's emphasizing like this is the same word, just pronounced differently. And it's funny, like when we've had we had a discussion after one of my pickup soccer matches that two nearby towns, like the town that I live in and the town next door, were going to be playing each other. Their soccer teams were going to be playing each other, and they're like, "Oh, it's a Northern Duchess Derby." Like, but even though we here are using that word, we're using it the way that they use it to describe a rivalry competition. Like it's it's just kind of funny that it's like two words with the same spelling that are sometimes pronounced differently, sometimes the same. It's just kind of funny. But
Two people divided by a common language.
right. So first match question. One odd thing that I noticed was every time, I think without exception, that we took a corner kick. First of all, I think it worked out that every corner kick was a left corner and Saka was taking it, I think, or right, I guess a right corner left from the keeper's perspective. But I don't remember anyone other than Saka taking corner kicks for us in this match, and there were quite a few corner kicks. But every time there's a corner kick, we were formed up on the far side of the 6-yard box. It was very strange. Like most of the time, you're kind of evenly spread out within the 6-yard box. Everybody's trying to cover in front of the goal to try and get their head on it and get it in. We would always start off on the far side of the 6-yard box. And then once it's kicked, start rushing forward. Do you know what was going on there? What was the strategy there?
So I can't speak to this particular strategy. I can make some guesses. One thing is we're not a very tall team. Like we have some taller guys like Gabriel, some of the center backs, but our forward line is generally pretty short. I think someone was looking it up. I think Jesus is 5'10" and he's the tallest one. And so you look and you know Forest and some of the other teams we played have some of those central defenders are over 6 feet tall, and so you don't want them jostling in the box because they're not gonna get anywhere, just the sheer height. So perhaps what it is by running in, you can use your momentum to put you into dangerous places as opposed to trying to jump in place against somebody of a similar height.
Interesting.
Another thing we're doing is we had a few that swung into the box, but we're also trying to play a lot more short corners. I mean, we had a really solid record earlier in the season of converting off of these set pieces, and we haven't been as good at that in the second half. I mean, one of the many reasons we've been struggling really down these last 2 months is our inability to do a lot with set piece plays like corners. And so I think there's also an element of trying something different. You get to the situation, you do something a little bit different, mix it up. I mean, that's what you want to be able to do, is have a number of almost like set plays when you're in those situations. And so you'll start, in a lot of ways, a lot like American football. Everyone starts in a similar position, but then as soon as the ball is right when the ball moves, everybody goes somewhere different. And as a defender, you maybe pull somebody where they're not expecting.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, it's like the line of scrimmage, right? Okay. Yeah, interesting. And I could see it's harder to defend someone in motion versus when you're more or less static. That all makes sense. So the next thing ended up getting explained. I'd marked a question down. I'd noticed that it happened in the 72nd minute and the 96th minute. And my question was answered not long after that 96th minute. I was wondering why the goal kicks were not being taken by the keeper. I don't remember ever seeing that before. They were having like a pinch kicker to use like a baseball term where you have like a pinch hitter batting for someone else or a pinch runner running for someone else. It was like a pinch kicker kicking these goal kicks, which apparently there was some injury that the keeper was playing through. And then at a certain point he couldn't anymore. Like he actually had to defend and landed on it wrong or something. He was pushed over the edge. Had to have his teammate play for him for literally like the last 5 seconds.
Yeah, so that's like right.
Long enough for him to get the punt off and then the ref blew the whistle and stoppage time was over.
Which was annoying given the state of the game at that point. Interesting. Yeah. I didn't realize I knew he was hurt at the end. That's why they took him off. I hadn't really seen that he was heard that he was hurt before. We noticed that as well. We're in the pub watching, and yeah, it was weird. I guess that makes more sense than just cause, there's no rule that says anyone can. There's no rule that says it has to be the keeper.
Right.
For all sorts of positional reasons, it makes sense. But yeah, it doesn't have to be him. And so yeah, it was kind of interesting to see. But I guess injury would do it.
Yeah, and so then as his sub came on, I noticed something that at first I thought was a peculiarity of their keeper kit. But then after spotting it, I looked and I pretty much confirmed that this was the case for their regular player jerseys too. But Forest has Premier League patches on both shoulders. Now I'm used to seeing for ours and every other team that we've played, as far as I can tell, we just have the one shoulder, like you could see on the jersey you're wearing right now. Like we have the Visit Rwanda on one sleeve, we have Premier League on the other one. Thank you. Nice bicep action.
Not this one, and not this one. This is blank.
No Premier League. Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah, right. So
yeah,
it would be the competition logo. So the Premier League or the Europa League or the FA Cup,
Europa,
every
exactly.
competition has it's sort of the competition patch.
Yeah, so I noticed on Forest jerseys, they had the Premier League patch on both sleeves, which was kind of funny, which I noticed after having noticed that the United Nations were the front of jersey sponsors, which, like, I can't imagine they're paying that much. They're, I don't know. That was kind of odd. And is that playing into why they don't have another sponsor on their other sleeve, and is that why they just figure out, well, we'll put the Premier League patch twice instead of having an empty sleeve? Like, what do you think's going on there?
Well, so the sleeve sponsorship is kind of a new thing. Like this is even the Visit Rwanda, Arsenal hasn't done that for very long. Typically you'd see obviously the big shirt sponsor, but then the manufacturer logo, which is effectively a sponsor itself in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't. I suspect that that's because they couldn't find someone who gave them a price they liked for the shirt sleeve. One thing you're also starting to see, I think they said the Premier League is actually going to ban certain betting companies. There's the concern that sort of the gambling aspect has become a little too much. So several clubs are going to have to change their shirt sponsors because those are betting companies, which they don't want as much.
Really interesting.
Yeah. So it could be that. In the case of Forest, I'm pretty sure that the UN isn't paying for that. I'm pretty sure that's considered like a charitable thing on there. I mean, for a while, for a couple of years, Barcelona had UNICEF as their shirt sponsor. And then they got Qatar Airways, which of course paid them substantially more money than UNICEF did. And there's this whole thing about, well, Barcelona, we don't do that. This is too important for sponsorship. Just kidding, Qatar. I mean, look, ours says Fly Emirates. We're not really in a position to, make too many comments about that. But I think that's a charitable thing. I don't think I'm pretty sure. I'm guessing. I'm kind of hoping for all kinds of reasons the UN isn't paying Nottingham Forest ever. It's not about Forest. Actually, it's more about the UN. But
yeah, right. Yeah. So, last question. That was just kind of a weird observation. Like it seemed like there's certain stadiums like this where you'll notice the players just slip and fall more often during certain matches and certain other matches. Is that just is this because this is a team that is not always in the Premier League? They're typically a division down or maybe more. I'm not sure. Is it just not as good a stadium? Is the turf not as good and it just isn't maintained, and for some reason that's making it slipperier and they fall more? What's with that? Do you know?
I don't know. I didn't notice it. I didn't notice anything particularly unusual in terms of players going to ground. Usually, sometimes you'll see that a lot. The grass is slick. Sometimes it's slick. I mean, generally you'll see them watering it during halftime and right before the game. You want a certain slickness to it. You don't want it too dry because then it becomes really hard. But then again, there's all sorts of I know this got talked about with Everton. There's all sorts of gamesmanship about how long does the grass grow? Do you overwater? To slow down maybe a speedier team like Arsenal can be. I didn't. It didn't stand out to me players slipping, but it could just be. It could just be it wasn't. Maybe it didn't water it quite right, or there was just some patches that weren't as good. We've talked about this. Arsenal's generally well known for the quality of the pitch at the Emirates, and back when they were at Highbury, generally they're one of the more well regarded ones. That makes sense. They're a big club. They spend a lot of money on it. Old Trafford is supposed to be, Anfield are really good stadiums. City Ground is a little bit smaller, both physically smaller, but also Forest is. We say Forest is a smaller club. They've won the European Cup twice, which is kind of crazy. But the equivalent of this was the equivalent of the Champions League, like the Premier League. The whole thing was renamed and redone in the early '90s. So Used to be
Oh, okay.
the European Cup. Now is the Champions League. Yeah, they've won it twice.
Oh, okay. I was assuming you meant like winning the Europa League. So they actually won the Champions League
They won.
essentially a couple
They won
times.
the trophy with the big ears, as they call it. The Champions League trophy has
Huh.
the handles are very pronounced. Well, so they sometimes call it trophy with the big ears. So you'll see it.
Yeah.
You know, they won it twice in the 70s. There's an interesting story. The guy who did it, the manager who led them, there was a guy named Brian Clough, who's probably the greatest English manager never to manage England. Took over Derby County, won the league with Derby County. I don't remember if they lost the European final or it was the semi-final, got knocked out in some controversial things, ended up leaving Derby to go to their closest competitor, Leeds, which was when Leeds was like the big club. Got fired shortly from that. Afterwards, goes and takes over Nottingham Forest, who's actually Derby's arch rival, takes over Forest, wins the league, and wins the European Cup. A lot of this is dramatized. There's a movie about, maybe it's about 10 or so years ago called The Damned United. So
Hmm.
Clough and his obsession with beating Leeds. And I mean, the whole cast is a who's who of English actors. So you'll recognize everybody, mostly because they were all in Harry Potter. But
I was gonna say, yeah.
well, yeah, I mean, but it's a really good one and really kind of a nice, interesting. I imagine, let's put it this way, it's a good movie to watch even if you don't know anything about soccer. I imagine now that you know a lot more about the league and some of these teams involved, it probably gives it a bit of an extra sort of veneer to it. Also, Brighton makes an appearance,
Hmm.
um, so yeah, if you're looking for something to watch, I know you've got some
Yeah.
time to yourself over the next few days. I think you can get it on iTunes. Should be able to get it
I'll have
on
to see. I'll have
iTunes.
to see if it's streaming. I'll put
Yeah.
a link to it in the show notes. I'll link to Letterboxd. That's a service that I use for tracking movies and seeing what people think of it and stuff. And it actually integrates nicely with telling me what streaming services that I subscribe to have any given thing. So I'll put that link in there. But yeah, that's yeah, I'll check it out. And on that note, I have noticed watching. I'm still watching the third season of Ted Lasso. I haven't finished it yet, but I am definitely appreciating a lot of the details in this season that were I was completely oblivious to watching the first couple. I've been indoctrinated.
I've
So
been
yeah, it's
rewatching. I'm in the middle of season one. I'm just gonna blow through the whole show over the next
hmm,
over the next week or so. So I'm in the middle of season one. I mean, go take a chance, go back to the beginning, and it's just there are just so many little delicious
mhm.
little Easter eggs all throughout. If you know what you're looking for, it's just in that sense one of those things that's just really well done. It really feels lived in that particular world, which is not an
I'll
easy
take
thing to
notes.
do.
We can we can make that some bonus content at one point. Just kind of all the little Easter eggs because I've been noticing some things like that too that I'm pointing out to my wife as we're watching now and stuff. So yeah, that'd be fun to talk about. One last question that I didn't have noted down. What's the name of Forest's manager?
Currently their manager's name is Steve Cooper.
Cooper. I thought Cooper was the last name. Is he in good health as far as you can tell?
I think so.
Because
Yes.
I'm a little concerned that during the last match he was suffering from a shellfish allergy or something. Like the whole time, his eyes were almost completely shut throughout the entire match, and I'm a little worried about him.
No, I think that's just what he looks like.
Okay, I didn't remember it from the last time that we played Forest, and maybe they had a different manager then. I'm not
No,
sure,
he's been
but
there. He's been there. Yeah, he's been there. He was actually the guy. He actually took them up when they. I don't know if they won the championship last year. Oh no, they won the playoff last year. So but yeah, he's the guy who took them up.
okay,
From championship, and yeah, so he's there for. He almost got fired this year, and but he didn't, and they're going to stay up next year. So good for them.
okay. Well, I hope he's okay.
Given they just
But
preserved promotion, I'm sure he's doing great.
yep. So so what's up for next week?
It's the season finale. This is it. The only one
Mm-hmm.
left. Home against Wolves. All 10 Premier League matches will kick off at the exact same time. There'll be a little drama surrounding relegation. There'll be some interesting positioning regarding Europe, but I frankly, it looks like it's ended up being a relatively quiet final day. which is usually a prelude to something really weird happening. So, this might be one, if you're watching live. We'll probably end up everyone will probably be keeping an eye on some of the other games going on, because for our game, we're not going anywhere. Wolves isn't going anywhere. It could be a long 90 minutes, frankly. But hopefully it becomes a nice moment where the fans who've been feeling a little restless the last couple of weeks for all the reasons we've talked about here, sort of like we've been putting off the retrospective part of it, but just kind of sit back, take a moment, and just sort of appreciate what we did this season. The whole of the season, and not just the struggles since April, but the whole of what we've done this season, what the team's accomplished.
Yeah, there'll be time for that next week. But meanwhile, actually, before we say goodbye, there's one thing that you did actually remind me about. Apple released a bunch of platform updates this week. So for Apple TV, iPad, iPhone, Mac, all their platforms. One of the changes is multi-stream viewing. So, and I think this might affect whatever platform you're watching the Apple TV app on for MLS. I think you can have multiple games open simultaneously now. So definitely on Apple's platforms. If you're watching like an Apple TV hardware or on an iPad or something, definitely. Maybe on like smart TV, Apple TV apps or something like that, it might also work too. So that's something. I don't know if MLS probably doesn't. I don't think they have the same format. They have a playoff format instead, right, or something for the end of the season.
There can be times where you'll want some of those games. One of the things they did is they put all the kickoffs aren't all at the same time. Every game kicks off at 7:30 local time. So all the games on the East Coast will start at the same time than the Central time, which is but there's actually more overlap in games. But I mean, especially towards the end of the season when you're jockeying for playoff position, that could actually be. That's what they've done. They have done that in the past. On the final day, they'll start every game at the same time. Hopefully, create some drama in terms of the finishes. And there's been some pretty wild finishes in terms of, goals scored very late, which swing results in different places. And as a result, different teams make the playoffs or don't. And so it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. So one last question. So we know we're on the beach for this match. We're in number 2, no matter whether we win, lose, or draw. What about Wolves? Where do they stand going into this final match?
They are. I mean, I'm looking up trying to look up the standings. They are not. They're not getting relegated, so they're definitely safe, and they're not going to challenge for Europe. So they're. I don't know if their spot is officially locked in. Hang on, let me see if I can find them. They're currently in 13th. I guess they could finish as high as, looks like they could actually, depending on results, could jump Chelsea for 12th, which would be funny, but not really. They'd make a little more money out of it in terms of the prizes. Or if we win, they could theoretically be jumped by West Ham or Bournemouth and end up finishing, I guess, as low as 15th. But I mean, finishing between 12th and 15th doesn't really matter. The real interesting one really looks like what's going to end up happening for the relegation zone. Everton, Leicester, and Leeds are all kind of bunched up there. We'll see what happens in their games. And then for Aston Villa and Tottenham for the last European spot. So yeah, Brighton, top 6 right now. City, Arsenal, Newcastle, United, Liverpool, and Brighton have all clinched spots in Europe for next year. So it's Aston Villa and Tottenham for the spot in the Europa Conference League, the third tier of European competition. So that's some of the things to keep an eye on. I don't remember exactly who everyone's playing, so I can't say how many of those games might end up overlapping with each other. But our game, not particularly.
Right. Yeah, and it's funny, for some reason, I've been using pretty much from at least near the beginning of the season, I've been using World Soccer Talk's Arsenal TV schedule page to tell me where I can watch these matches, but they don't have a listing for this last one, so I don't know where I'm watching it.
Yeah, so what the reason for that is that NBC is going to have all of them. They're going to try and put as many of them on TV as they can.
Right.
But they're gonna pick the networks based on the matches. So I wouldn't be shocked at all if we wind up on Peacock, or who knows, maybe we're gonna wind up on MSNBC or something. It's
Right.
like
Because ours doesn't matter, basically.
exactly.
Yeah.
They're gonna put games that have something at stake. Really have something at stake will be on their bigger channels. Could be NBC, could be USA. Whereas other lesser games will not be like probably like ours. So that's really what they're waiting for on that. And there are games. There was a game earlier today. It was Newcastle, I think, clinched their spot in the Champions League today. I think what they played today. Trying to do all this at once. There's a couple games, I think, Wednesday and Thursday. Um, yeah, Newcastle and Leicester scoreless draw today.
Hmm.
And there's a couple of games there's a couple of games on Wednesday. Well, there's Brighton and City is on Wednesday. There might be a game or two Thursday. And then, of course, everyone on Sunday.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for joining us at Gooner U. We're on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and some other places, and we appreciate you subscribing to our show and sharing with friends. If you want to listen the night we record, you can become a Gooner U superfan to download a raw, unedited recording right away, as well as occasional bonus content. There's a link in the show notes to join. And thanks again to our sponsor, Liquid IV. You can find them at liquidiv.com and enter code GOONER, GOONER, to save 20% at checkout. You can follow our show on Twitter at GoonerUShow for updates and to ask questions. Again, my name is Dove. You can find me on Twitter at Dove Frankel. And with me, as always, is Keith. And you can find him in a pub watching Arsenal matches.
Go you Gunners.